Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things and welcome to another video, and today I thought I would do a bit of a discussion video about TBRs and TBR size. So today I just wanted to have a chat about TBRs as a thing and like unread books that we have on our shelves, I suppose. So there are two things that inspired me to make this video. One is that Helene from Books by Lanes did a really interesting video on her channel a few weeks ago about why she likes having a really small TBR. I think she said she has like less than 10 physical books unread that she actually owns, and why she likes that and why she prefers that as a way of reading and a way of like gathering books, which I thought was really interesting. And then also when I put up a video a few weeks ago showing all of the unread books that are on my shelves, there were at that point 60 of them, there are a bit less now. Quite a lot of people were surprised by that number and said that that was actually quite a small number and they had, you know, hundreds of unread books on their shelves. And so I thought it'd be an interesting thing to discuss potentially. So for those of you who don't know or might be newer to BookTube, TBR stands for to be read, and usually when people talk about a TBR, they mean a to be read list, either for a particular like event or readathon or a month, for example, or they mean like their big overall long-term TBR, all of either the physical books on their shelves that they haven't read or all of the books they intend to read, which they might have in different forms or they might just be planning on reading at some point in the future. I thought it would hopefully be interesting to make this video this month as I'm currently hosting my TBR Clear Out Readathon, the basic premise of which is to read the books that have been on your shelves for a long time, to get to the books that have been on your TBR for ages, and also to get your physical TBR down. Like, that is the premise of the challenge and the readathon for me, and I think for a lot of people who are taking part as well. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about why I want to get my TBR down and what like number I'm aiming for. I have seen some people on BookTube do like 0 TBR challenges where they're trying to get their TBR down to 0. Amanda Center has done some really interesting videos on this in the past, and I will link down below some of them if I can, and I know her physical TBR is now quite small and she's been getting it down steadily over a few years. And Emma from Drinking by My Shelf does a really interesting series sort of in place of monthly wrap-ups called Balancing the Books, where she like counts up how many new books she's acquired and how many books she's read and works out the number of books that are on her physical TBR, and is like really strict with herself about making sure that number doesn't go up too much. So I've seen lots of people whose approach is very much to minimise and get that TBR down as much as possible, and then there are also lots of people who would never want to have their TBR at 0 books and who like to have hundreds of books on their shelves. I know I've heard other people say that one of the things they like about owning hundreds of books they haven't read is that they basically have their own personal library. They can just pick up what they're in the mood for. And I think I'm definitely someone who is in between, in that I would like to have less unread physical books on my shelves than I have. So like I said, I had 60 at the end of March when I made that video. So it's gone down quite a lot this month, and hopefully for the rest of April and also maybe into May I'll get my physical TBR down quite a lot, because I'm not really acquiring books at the moment because of lockdown and bookshops being closed, and like I'm not requesting things for review because obviously publishers can't send them and stuff like that. So I am actively trying to get my physical TBR down. That is part of the point of the TBR Clear Out Readathon. That is part of the reason why I have a TBR jar. So in this jar I have the names of every book that I acquired before Christmas 2019, and every month I pick a title out the jar and read it. I did it a bit last year. I'm trying to do it much more consistently this year because I find it a really good way of making sure I get to books and not forgetting them and letting them lie on my shelves for ages. So I am definitely trying to like actively get my TBR down, but my aim is definitely not to get down to 0 books on my physical TBR, because then what would I read next? I like having physical books on my shelves to read, and I like having a choice of physical books on my shelves to read. I don't feel like I need a huge choice. I don't feel that I need hundreds of books, partly because I'm not really a mood reader, but I think I would always want at least 20 to 30 books unread on my shelves for me to pick from, so that I would have enough physical books on my shelves to last me a couple of months. However, I do want to get my TBR down. I do want to have a smaller TBR, and that's partly more about how long the books have been on my shelves than how many there are. For example, yes, I only have 60 unread books on my shelf, but some of them are books that I've owned for more than 10 years, and I don't want books to hang around on my shelves for more than 10 years. I think my ideal like TBR would be for me to have like 20 to 30 unread books on my shelves that I've only had there for less than 2 years. Preferably less than a year, but I don't think that would ever happen. Another reason why I want to get my physical TBR down is because I don't have that much space for books. And in general, the books that I've read are only still on my shelves because I liked them. If I give a book 3 stars or less, I usually give it to a charity shop, unless it's a book where like I love everything else by the author, but it was just that one book that I didn't love so much, and then sometimes I keep them so I have the full author's work. But in general, most books that I read that I don't love, I give away, which means all the books on my shelves that I've read are books that I love. And if I want to make more space for books, then what I want to do is get rid of the books that I haven't read yet. So I want to read more of my unread books in order that if there are some that I don't like, I can get rid of them and then have more space to put new books on my shelves, if that makes sense. I've heard people talk on BookTube before about having a curated bookshelf. I think it was Claudia from the Spencer's Library who I've heard talk about this the most. But the idea that the books that are on your bookshelf are books that you love and books that you really like and books that you would want to reread one day. And I like the idea of that. I want the majority of books on my bookshelves to be books that I love, books that I like, books that I want to read again in the future, potentially books that I'm interested in that I know I will talk about on BookTube again, not books that I have read once and never thought about again, and not books that I haven't read yet, because then they don't mean something to me yet, I suppose. So in that sense, I'd rather the greater proportion of books that I own be books that I have read. And I'm always trying to like read more of the books that I own that I haven't read yet, and then give the ones that I don't like away to charity so that I have more space. I don't have that much space in my flat for books. This is my only bookshelf. I mean, there's like piles either side of it, but I don't have another bookshelf. At some point, hopefully I will have a bigger bookshelf and a bit more space. But as it stands currently, my bookshelf is really, really packed. So I don't feel like I can acquire too many more books, and I don't feel like I want to have a huge amount of unread books because I just don't have the space to have that many unread books, that I don't feel like they'd be warranting their space as much as if I'd read them and I loved them. I also do feel that like having a smaller TBR or like getting my TBR down gives me some sense of achievement in an arbitrary way that I enjoy. But that's kind of beside the point. Another reason why I like having a smaller TBR, and I want to have an even smaller TBR, is because while I read a lot of books, a lot of the books I read are not from my physical TBR, not from my physical shelves. So I work in publishing, which means about a third of what I read in every month and across the whole year are books that I read for work. I also read quite a lot of audiobooks as well, and I do read some ebooks, especially during readathons like Jane Austen July and Victober. If I'm reading more classics, I'm likely to read things on ebook. And also, usually lockdown aside, I do borrow books from the library and use the library to read different things as well. So not everything that I read is something from my physical TBR. So up to the end of March, so far in 2020, I'd read 50 books. 19 of them were books I read for work, 11 were audiobooks, 1 was an ebook, 3 were library books, and I definitely think that's a decrease on the amount of library books I was taken out in 2019, and then 19 of them were from my physical TBR. So I read 50 books, but only 19 of them were books that were actually from my physical shelves. Because I do enjoy statistics, I also looked back at the statistics I had for 2019, and in 2019 I read 194 books, 71 of which were from my physical TBR, but in that year I also acquired 64 books, so my TBR therefore went down by 71 and then up by 64. Then in 2018 I read 81 books that I physically owned, and I acquired 53 new physical books. I don't know how interesting any of you are finding these numbers, but I found it quite interesting. What this tells me is that I read more physical books from my shelf than I acquire physical books, which means that I want to have a TBR of sorts because I'm not buying at the rate that I'm reading. So I do want to have books on my TBR, on my shelves for me to pick from. But also it tells me that the majority of books I read are not books that I physically own. They are books for work and audiobooks and library books and everything else. So actually I don't want to have a huge physical TBR because I just won't get through it because I have so much other stuff in reading that is not from my physical TBR. And obviously I could acquire more books than I do. Like I feel like I do acquire quite a lot of books a year, but I think if I compare it to other booktubers and when I watch other people's book hauls and stuff, I actually don't think I acquire that many books, which is partly, as I said, I think because not everything I read are books that I physically own, but also I don't actually buy very many books at all. Like if I look back upon books that I acquire in a year, the majority are review copies or Christmas presents or birthday presents. It's actually not that common for me anymore to go out and buy books. I used to do that much more, I think, which is one of the reasons why I have lots of unread books on my shelf. Although saying that, I kind of think that's something I would like to do more. Like I feel like I would like to go out to a bookshop and buy lots of books, And I don't do that very often. And you know, it's many things. Books can be expensive, books take up a lot of space, but I think the main reason why I don't do that a lot is because I feel like I have so many books already that I have to read that I haven't read yet. So I feel like the more I get my TBR down, the more I feel freedom to go out and acquire new books. Because, as I said, it's not that I feel my physical TBR is necessarily too big, but I do feel that my physical TBR is too old. Those books have been there on my shelf for way too long, and so many of them I bought and didn't read 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. And I don't want that to be the case. I would rather have on my shelves like 20 to 30 books that I have acquired recently that I'm really excited to read still, and then get to them soon. Another statistic I have for you, just because these are interesting, so I counted how many books I own because I thought this might be interesting, and I owned 309 books, and at the beginning of April, I counted this like a couple of weeks ago, I had read 80% of the books that I own, and then 20% of the books that I own are books that I haven't read. So I think that's quite good that I've read 80% of what's on my shelves. That's actually more than I thought it would be. But yeah, I like having read 80% of what's on my shelves. I don't think I would ever want to have more unread books than read books on my shelves, because I like the fact that I look at my shelves and there's lots of books there that I love. And that's what I always want to be the case, and so books I haven't read yet, I don't want them to take up as much space as books that I have read and loved, and that's one of the reasons why I would like to read more of the books on my shelves. So, this has been a very rambly video. I don't know how much of it made sense, but basically I just wanted to discuss like TBR sizes and how many books I would like to own on my shelves that I haven't read. I think my ideal physical TBR is like 20 to 30 books that I've acquired fairly recently, within the last year or two. That would be my ideal. And maybe this time next year I'll be there, but we shall see. I would be very interested to know what your guys' ideal TBRs are. Do you like to have a lot of unread books on your shelves to pick from? Or are you someone who like buys a new book every time you want to read a new book? How do you do it, and how do you organise your reading? I'm very, very curious to know, because I think everyone feels quite differently about this. That is all I wanted to say for today. I hope this video has been interesting, if a bit bitty and rambly. If you're participating in the TBR Clear Out Readathon, I hope it's going well. I hope you're enjoying it. And that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.